Hi, Dave here, and this is episode 17 of the art review series. And this time we're going to take a look at the work of Brian Coughlan. Coughlan. Now, Brian is a character concept artist, and I'm actually very fascinated by his work because he's kind of a mix between a painter and a designer. And he usually does, or most of his work, at least in his ArtStation portfolio, is mostly 2D painted. And it's actually kind of impressive because not everything actually has to be photobashed. And you can actually take a chill pill and learn how to paint. Yeah, but I'm really genuinely inspired by his work because it makes me want to paint more, and I'm very glad I was able to find his work. Now, Brian Coughlan, I believe I did find him before. Now I may be forgetting this or have bad recollection, but I think I found Mr. Brian on Instagram like way back in one of my old Instagram accounts. I think I did find Brian over there. And I think he did link his ArtStation, and that's when I did follow him on ArtStation. Now, unfortunately, the only link I found useful in Brian Coughlan's kind of profile is the ArtStation one, where I only have his ArtStation portfolio link. So hopefully, if you do find his work, please link it down in the description so that people and I also want to be able to follow him in whatever social media platform he has. So anyway, he does focus a lot on characters. For example, this one, a lot of his characters are actually very dynamic. If not because of the pose or of the way he paints, his designs are very dynamic as well. I'm not sure how to explain it, but the way he designs, or his design aesthetic, his personal design style is very kind of dynamic. It's not very boring. It's actually kind of lively and very interesting. I'm not sure how to classify his design style, but it is very intriguing. And he does this thing like most artists where they kind of paint evenly throughout the body and then they focus on a certain area. For example, in terms of character design and stuff, they usually go for the head. And in this case, you can see he did detail the helmet design a little more than the body and stuff. And one cool thing about Brian is that he can paint faces pretty well. It reminds me of the work of Miguel Iglesias. He does the same. He also does a lot of character concepts. But again, like Brian, Miguel paints a lot of the faces, and even the faces themselves have a kind of character to them. And they're both pretty good in kind of sketching out and painting expressions, facial expressions. So this is one of Brian's other concepts. Now, I do like the way he painted the belly right there. It looks very fine. Now, I do think, because I've seen some of Brian's sketches where he does use the soft brush. So he may use it in the beginning, along with the line sketch. And then once he has established the values and the value ranges, he'll start using maybe a harder edged brush to kind of define the edges and stuff. And but again, it looks so soft, am I right? And even the leg, this kind of bionic leg, it's kind of well rendered, and it does have a kind of texture to it. And what I like about Brian, again, is that he paints a lot of his stuff, and it's kind of a solid reminder that not everything has to be photobashed. You know what I mean? You can actually develop the skill of painting textures. I feel like I'm scolding myself now, but yeah. So Brian does have he does have, I think, a painterly background. Or, excuse me, I think he has a traditional painting background, because I have seen in some of his portfolio stuff, he'll paint an acrylic piece traditionally, and then he'll bring it to Photoshop and then paint it, like continue painting that piece in Photoshop. And I think it does add a more, traditional feel. And even if it doesn't do his traditional stuff, with the whole scanning and stuff, even when he does Photoshop, it does transfer. I think his experience in traditional mediums does show in his more digital work. And yeah, again, he's very impressionistic in some of his stuff sometimes, but he does like to tighten things up in the head, because obviously that's the focus of his work. And you can see here he did use a bit of the soft brush, I believe, to kind of lay down some values, just to give a general gist of where a certain part is. And then I think from there he'll use the soft brush to kind of lay down the gist of the part, and then he'll probably use a harder brush to define a certain kind of say a part of this mech. And I do like how he often does show his initial sketches, and then there's this kind of nice blend of multiple layers of say the sketch, the kind of gray value painting, and then the more colored parts, along with the softer kind of paints, and then the harder edged paint stuff. So Brian does focus more on sci-fi, but he sometimes dabbles on fantasy stuff. Now I'm not sure if it's kind of a project-based thing, but I think he does have a two-way with sci-fi and fantasy types of artwork. So he also does mechs. So I would classify mechs as more character stuff, especially if they do have a humanoid form. So this one's more of a mech. He does have a very, again, if you look at his kind of strokes in the legs, it's more kind of straightforward, very direct. And then as you focus in on the head, it's a little tighter compared to the bottom parts. And yeah, he does have a gouache-like feel, because it's more, his work is a little more opaque compared to the more opacity type of brushwork. And again, very painterly in some of his work. So an old concept of his, I think this is unfinished. This one actually slightly reminds me of Frank Frazetta. I think it's because of the pose of this guy. It's very kind of imposing. Again, this is a fantasy-oriented thing. So Brian does have a very solid base in human anatomy as well. And you can see in some of his sketches, he can actually draw and paint human figures. And of course, on top of that, he can paint more sci-fi stuff and even design. His designs are actually pretty legit. And I do like this one. This is way more painterly. And again, he did focus more, or he did tighten it up in the kind of head part. But this is a good looking sketch. Very painterly. And even here, the way he designs, even though the painting style is very kind of, it's not that finished looking, but he can communicate the general idea of the design. And I think that's something that I do want to develop. The painting enough part, I think, is something that I would like to take away from his work. Some kind of a helmet design. Again, very loose in the edges, and as you focus in on the head, it gets tighter. So the head of this one actually, it actually reminds me of the Predator, because I think the proportions of the eyes and the mouth and some of the kind of, these are kind of cables or tentacles. It does remind me of the Predator kind of design. So this is more of a suit, I believe. But again, he does focus his rendering on the head, and then he kind of leaves everything slightly loose in the bottom parts. Very suggestible kind of paint work or brush work. And for the background, it's just kept very abstract, similar to Jeff Simpson's work, especially how he does the backgrounds. They're kind of the same in that regard, at least for this piece right here. Now this is another character sketch, obviously. No shit, Dave. So this one is actually a little more opaque. You can see from the, it's a bit more straightforward, direct. More of a fantasy piece. This one is. And wow, this one's pretty cool. The way the kind of edges are desaturated, and then he focuses the saturation, the colored parts, on the kind of chest and the head, and even the sword. Even though it's not saturated, he kind of left the silhouette in the bottom as is, and he did suggest some details in the top part. So for me, this is a kind of a good way to sketch, where you don't actually have to render every single thing. You can just focus on the parts that are important, and if need be, you can just develop it later on. And this one actually reminds me of a Star Wars themed kind of character. It feels like a Star Wars kind of character to me. Now this one is one of his narrative stuff. He doesn't do a lot of keyframes in his work. It's more design oriented, but again, you know, I think he can, with the way he paints, I think he can easily do more keyframe stuff. So some suit designs, helmet designs, and again, he can paint the face pretty well. This one, I do like the very looseness of the sketch, the kind of suit design. And again, here you can see the way he draws and sketch out the faces. You know, he does have a very solid background of like this one, damn, of painting the face or the human head. And he can add expressions and add a little more life to his designs. So this one is a kind of a fantasy piece, very abstract kind of painting in the background. And then he did add the kind of standard reflections. Obviously you can tell this character is set in daylight with the blue sky reflected on the armor. So again, he can actually come up with some pretty cool designs. This one is more of a mech suit thing. And you can tell by his brushstrokes, it's not even that detailed, not very fine kind of illustration type of artwork, but it's tighter than my work, I would say. But it does enough to suggest the major forms of the design, and I think it's kind of a good standard, or Brian's artwork is a kind of a good standard to have when you're doing character designs or vehicle designs or any kind of like transportation stuff. So this one's more of a vehicle stuff design. Now this one's pretty interesting because he does show off his human anatomy designs here, or excuse me, the sci-fi design plus his background in human anatomy. It's pretty convincing, and the way he paints this leg right here, I can actually even see some of his strokes in this kind of core shadow, and he did add some soft kind of reddish reflection coming from these kind of sci-fi lights. So he doesn't use a lot of like varied types of brushes. I think he keeps his brush tools very simple, and I think it does a good job of kind of compacting in a way your artwork. More of a sci-fi piece, a fantasy type of artwork. And again, he did focus more his painting on the head, fantasy stuff. Now, even if this is super loose, I can still feel the design in this one. And this is kind of a great way to start a design conversation. You know, it doesn't have to be detailed. You can always finish things to a kind of top tier illustration level later on. But I think in the kind of beginning stages of conceptualization, I think this is enough for me. And I do like the way, again, Brian can be more of a painter and a designer at the same time. Because even if this is painterly, it can communicate the design, and I think it's enough. So black and white sketch. Again, he doesn't have to paint every single thing, just the kind of major parts. So these are more kind of fantasy based designs. Now these ones are more tightly rendered. And again, you can reach this level if you want, if need be, by your client or employer, but I'm more into this kind of style for now, and I think this is enough to kind of get good at, and you can always develop it later on to this kind of level, to this kind of it actually feels like a keyframe to me. But yeah, very painterly strokes right here. And he did focus his painting on the helmet, a bit of the shoulder, and some parts of the leg. And obviously this kind of a bike craft thing. So this one is... Now this one's actually pretty cool because you can actually see some hue variety in the background. You can see some greens, some reds, some yellows, some pinks, some green here, some blue here. I think it does add life to your paintings if you can include most of the hues. It doesn't have to be that saturated, it can be very, very subtle, but seeing that kind of bit of color can add more life to your sketch. And I also like the pose, and again, he did a good job of painting the face. And yeah. This one's more of a keyframe to me. To him, it's a spit paint, it's a spit paint. So it's kind of a speed painting thing. So these are some helmet designs. Again, very well done, well painted. I mean, you can tell it's kind of 2D painted, but it can still communicate the design very well. It's not even that tight of a painting, but it's enough for someone else to figure out its kind of 3D form. So yeah, pretty cool stuff. So this one's more of a biological kind of mech. It's pretty common nowadays to not make mechs very kind of boxy. A lot of mechs nowadays are more kind of animalistic, and they do have more organic forms. At least that's what I'm noticing in ArtStation. That's kind of the thing nowadays, so yeah, he can do them pretty well as well. So this is actually more gouache-like because it's very opaque. Even this one. And again, he did tighten up the head a little more. And to me, this is a pretty good kind of painting sketch. I do like the way he shows a bit of the kind of unfinished edges. It makes it more natural, and it even adds more life, I believe, or I feel. If it's not too clean, it makes it more... It adds a human touch to the whole thing, so yeah. This one is a character sketch, obviously. He did show the kind of thumbnail version here with the line sketch, and then he just did a nice paint over. he does show a bit of the line sketch in the bottom, and yeah. So some more sketches, grayscale. He did render the hand right here a bit, but again, it's enough to kind of communicate the design. He focused on the big shapes, and yeah. This one's obviously very samurai inspired. You can tell by the armor. Of course, the sword is a giveaway. More mech stuff. Very interesting. So he did show his kind of line sketch. So here's what he did, I think. He did a very simple thumbnail in kind of a small view, and then he expanded that thumbnail, did a line sketch over that thumbnail, and then he started painting, and then eventually you get this kind of painted concept. So it's a nice process, and I'm glad he did show a bit of his process. Now hopefully he does do a YouTube channel thing, so we can all see his kind of time lapses and stuff. But yeah. Some more sketches, thumbnail, painted version. Now this one I do like. It's very painterly. I love the color scheme, and again it's very painted. It's it does show a bit of the design, but it's also painted at the same time, and I do like that kind of this kind of look, where it's not overly painted, like to a point of it being a kind of a finished marketing illustration. It's painting, you know, it's a nice concept art painting. This one's a fantasy piece, very, very big sword. This one actually looks like a Star Wars kind of concept, the design at least. And yeah, again, he does paint the face, and his painting is pretty loose here, but enough to communicate the kind of garment or attire. So this one's more of a keyframe to me. He does sometimes add noise if it's kind of a complete filled up frame and not necessarily a design kind of sketch. So he does add a few blurs here and there. And the painting of this character, of this mech, is pretty loose. And I think if you keep your sketches loose, it can suggest movement. So I think it makes sense for this piece. So again, more of a keyframe. He did add some texture here, so this could be a photo thing. But again, most of it is just painted. And again, he did add some noise. To me, this is too big of a noise to add for this kind of in this kind of scale. But you know, it works. So I think I did use 3D here. Very interesting design. Some more 2D sketches. Nice line sketch, and then he painted over that very nicely. Very cool design, grayscale. And I think it's a good thing. You don't always have to color your sketches. It can be left as a kind of a black and white thing, because you can always color them afterward and kind of black out your process. Like with grayscale paintings, you can definitely focus more on design, and if you want later on, you can just add some colors. You know, it's a nice way to kind of do things step by step. I do like the way he painted this. He left the legs very silhouetted, added a nice gradient, made a simple background to kind of let this character pop out, or at least the torso, or at least for the torso and the head to pop out more. And again, he did focus more on the head he focused on the head in terms of painting. It's a bit more tight and detailed. Same thing for this guy, very simple kind of bottom legs. It's adjustable kind of feet design, and then more kind of focused painting on the head. And again, he does have a certain kind of a sci-fi design lean. He does have a certain style design-wise. And you can see the kind of a similar forms in all of his characters, especially in the kind of the sci-fi realm. He does have not only a painting style, but a design style. So this one's more of a sci-fi piece. The head design actually looks like a kind of, I remember the work. It reminds me of one of the pieces of Victor Hugo Harmatuk, the Brazilian, I believe, concept artist. But anyway, again, this is a sci-fi kind of piece right here. And so this one's obviously samurai based, or it does have some samurai Japanese influence. And I think adding a bit of a pose to your characters does add life. It doesn't have to be a kind of a simple turnaround concept. You can kind of put it in a nice pose, and it does add character to your character. Nice mech suit thing. Fantasy stuff. So this one is the same, kind of a painterly background, and he did focus more his painting on the chest and the helmet design. It actually reminds me of Ki Yang's work. I will eventually be doing an art review of Ki Yang's work. But yeah, this one's more of a keyframe, an old work of his, I believe. Again, simple kind of background, and he did focus his design painting on certain areas: the chest, the armor, the head, a bit of the sword, and this part of the leg. And again, very well painted. It's enough to communicate the design. He did add some noise. Again, he does this when he fills up the entire frame. He'll add some noise. Oof. Same thing. He left the legs very silhouetted with a nice soft gradient from the bottom. And then he did some more focused painting on the top. Grayscale painting right here. You can even see some of the line sketches below. Oh, I actually do like the way he did the feet. It's kind of a hand. You see? Very cool design. A few more mech sketches, mech designs. Now this one is pretty thick. Again, very samurai influenced. So very nice line sketch, loose line sketch in the bottom, and then he did a very simple paint over or underpainting to kind of fill out the major forms. So this is his last piece. A re-upload of one of his old concepts, and you can tell back then he was already a pretty good kind of 2D painter, and that's actually what I want to take away from his work, is that you can actually be a good painter while being a very good designer. Now of course he's more focused on characters and stuff, but I think if you want to kind of, because in concept art it's hard to kind of just focus solely on kind of one side, because there is the kind of art side, the artist kind of side, and then there's the more designer kind of side. And for concept art, it's kind of hard, or you can't really avoid both. You'll have to kind of blend both together. And I think Brian Coughlan is a good example of how the two kind of art side and design side can meet. And he's also a good proof that you can stick to 2D. I mean, of course you don't have to just stick to 2D, but you can achieve some pretty nice designs with some 2D painting. So hopefully you discovered a new artist today, Mr. Brian Coughlan. So if you do find links of his kind of media platforms, please link it to me in the comment section or whatever. So yeah, I hope you have a good day. I'll see you in the next art review. I think we'll be working or checking out the work of Axel Sauerwald. And thankfully, I was actually able to comment in one of his, or ask a question in one of his recent posts. And thankfully, he was able to respond to my question. And we'll be talking about that in the next video. So I hope you have a good day. Stay free.